Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Welcome back to Green Scorpion. Today's video is the top 10 video game crime lords. Yep. We got mafia bosses, crime lords, gangsters. Yeah. Basically, those you don't want to cross on a bad day. So, remember, difference between crime and crime lords, so let's see who runs the best criminal empire, huh? Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's get to it. There you are, buddy.
Greetings, Oscar. Please allow me a few moments for me to properly introduce myself. My name is Don Vito Prosciutto. They call me the Game
The
Father. Mafia Don, all-around scumbag, and yes, video game connoisseur. I love video games. The look,
Who doesn't?
the feel, the smell, the taste.
I'm guessing.
Sometimes with a little white wine, other times with a little pesto sauce. But enough of the menu. Let's move on to the meat and potatoes.
I wonder if this is actually based off The Godfather, you know?
No.
Just had to ask.
Word has reached my ear that you are seeking simple requests for what you call top 10 countdowns. Let me be the first to say, Oscar, that I love your videos. You got an amazing talent. You bring a lot of creativity, a splash of realism, and just a dash of humor. Just like a good plate of paschetti, you know what I mean?
Sketty.
However, there is something that weighs very heavily upon my heart in all the time that I have seen you, that you have not addressed a very important issue of mine. I speak, of course, of crime bosses. Not just mafia dons like myself. I also speak of gang leaders, international kingpins, maybe even those of the intergalactic, futuristic, or even interdimensional variety. Pick your poison however you like. Now, if you have trouble with this particular issue, perhaps my boy Paulie here can help you with that. He is a good motivational speaker. He lives in a van that's just down by the river. Now, I hope you will consider this very generous offer. This is an offer that you simply cannot refuse. You're a good kid, Oscar. I know you will do the right thing. Just remember, play the game, but leave the cannolis. Have a nice life, kid.
Now that right there is an offer that I cannot refuse.
Nope. Considering this is a Patreon request, let's go. Hey, Jack. Jack? Don't know you. Go! Let's go. Let's see who runs their empire the best. Coliseum music. I like it.
You come to me on the day of my latest video
Taki.
and ask of me, Don Scorpion,
Lucky.
who are the greatest crime lords in video games? Well, you have always been good to us, Buzzsaw the Righteous, and you've shown me loyalty and respect.
Like, seriously, dude, I would have done the countdown anyway. You have the patron reward, but this was awesome.
So what do you mean by crime lord? I don't give that distinction to just any mook with an evil plan. There are plenty of supervillains out there, but being a crime lord means that you walk the narrow line between order and chaos. You run a tight ship, controlling your cronies carefully and overseeing their illegal acts, making sure that they serve the good of the family. If someone treats you right, they're made men. And if someone treats you wrong, well, they just ordered a pair of cement shoes. To give a little more
And the Slum of the
distinction,
Fishes.
Dr. Doom is a supervillain. Loki is a supervillain. Kingpin is a crime lord. Because crime isn't an attack, it's a business. Bonus points if you can hide your criminal dealings within a civilized society, if your establishment is so integral to the culture that the police are afraid to arrest you and create a power vacuum, and if you can do the whole thing in a suit and tie. Last thing, crime lords are masters of delegation. They always got people doing their dirty work, to the point where they can just chill behind a desk most of the time. But when the going gets rough, they roll up their sleeves and they take care of business themselves, and everybody knows it. Now, enough talk. We should be listing. These are the top 10 video game crime lords.
Yeah, basically, people that you don't want to cross. Let's use first, shall we?
First and foremost, there's a character I always think about when it comes to organized crime. Fuyuhiko Kazuryu from Danganronpa
Oh yeah, the
2.
Ultimate Yakuza.
And while I'm not going to
don't
discuss
really
the whole
see him
game
do
here,
a lot
I'll
of
be talking
criminals.
about it quite a bit, so you know the drill. Skip ahead if you don't want game-ruining spoilers. Capiche? Now then, Fuyuhiko was born heir to the powerful Kazuryu clan, a substantial family of the Yakuza. And for those of you who are totally uninitiated, the Yakuza is a real-world crime syndicate based out in Japan, the Mafia of the East, if you will. Since
Pretty
Hope
much.
Peak Academy accepts remarkable children of any definition, Fuyuhiko is enrolled as the ultimate Yakuza. It's not long, however, before
He's the
things
next
go
head of the
sideways,
Yakuza clan,
and
basically.
Fuyuhiko's entire class is abducted to a paradise island and forced into the usual murder mystery killing game. Given that Fuyuhiko's title implies violent crime, the other contestants are understandably leery of him. Not helped
Can't
out when he
blame him?
flat out says he'll gladly kill someone if he has to. Not the
True.
best strategy, little Don, but fortunately weapons
Oops.
are hard to come by on the island, and
Thank
physically
God for that.
speaking, Fuyuhiko doesn't look too threatening. Sure, he's got a mouth
Though
like a
that
sailor, but he
changes
looks more
in
like
the
he's
second
gonna
game.
yell
He's a
about
little
his turn to play the Xbox, not murder someone. So for the first
Yes,
couple of weeks,
I blame the
he keeps his
babyface.
distance from the rest of the group. He's also usually seen hovering around the scene of the crime, which makes him a constant suspect. His involvement, however, gets a lot more interesting in the second case, when we finally learn about his involvement with another student, Peko
Peko.
Pekoyama, the ultimate swordsman. It turns
Or
out
woman
that
in
the
this case.
Kazuryu clan raised Peko as well, and since birth trained her to be Fuyuhiko's personal bodyguard and assassin. That's
Yeah.
quite a card to keep up your sleeve, but seeing as this is a killing game and they didn't want to arouse suspicion, the two decided to keep their prior relationship on the down low until now.
Which,
So, yeah,
honestly, good
Fuyuhiko
call
only
for
gets number
Hiko.
10 because while his power as the boss baby is often implied, it's rarely demonstrated. True, in a brief glimpse of the anime, we see that should he take over his clan, Fuyuhiko could cause quite a bit of damage to the world. But in the actual game, he's cut off from the resources
I
afforded
mean, he
by
was
a
the
crime
ultimate despair.
Still, I wanted to include him for 3 reasons. 1, he's my second favorite character in the series, Sumi. 2,
Hyena.
it's really interesting how his personality both contradicts and complements the qualities of a good crime lord. He's a really gentle guy when you get to know him. His explosive temper is mostly something he developed out of a necessity to look strong for his
Oh yeah,
family.
after his sister was
And
killed.
he can be surprisingly a stickler for the rules when it comes to things like drinking. And finally, talk about that network! Alone on an island with only 15 other people, and somehow one of them managed to be on his payroll. Sure, he inherited most of his power. Sure, he's usually afraid to really use it, but even with just one devoted follower, the kid plays his card well. Or maybe it's Peko who's the real brains of the partnership? Either way,
Well,
it's one of the most
I'll
interesting
talk
character
about that
arcs
later
in the
in a minute.
game, and you'll want to keep an eye out for it.
I mean, he does become a great ally after the second case, you know. He actually did run in to help Peko with the fight. But I think she was actually doing well until she accidentally cut him. You know, lost an eye after that. But still used her body to save the boy. Which, afterwards, does become a worthwhile friend. I mean, hey, I had to point it out, but still. Sorry, I just had to point that out from this story. It's really interesting, so no wonder he's kind of a fan favorite for people, you know? Anyway, just had to point it out. Number 9's coming up. Earliest pause I ever done.
As I rounded out the countdown during the planning phases, I realized that there are a ton of characters that could be considered based on what I counted as a crime lord. Or rather, who felt the most crime lord, which is of course subjective and rather silly. Mercer Frey, head of Skyrim's Thieves Guild, was one consideration, though that has a very different feel to it, and Thieves is something I'd like to tackle another time on this channel. Masayoshi Shido from Persona 5 isn't a crime lord in the traditional sense. He doesn't manage an evil corporation per se, he's a political candidate. But he is at the head of a criminal conspiracy, and he checks all the right boxes for me. It's been long
Pretty
enough that I
much.
can include Persona 5 spoilers, right? Well, you've been warned. Throughout the game, the player meets some seriously corrupt individuals. Money laundering
Okay.
bankers, credit-stealing artists,
Madarame.
and like. Using the power of the metaverse, you
Okumura,
enter mind
a lot of
dungeons to
people.
battle these criminals' psyches and force them into a state of repentance so that they'll change their evil ways. If you're thematically minded, you'll notice a 7 deadly sins motif with these bosses, and
He's in the
Shido,
palace
being
name.
the 7th boss, represents
Beast.
pride. This is
How-
extremely appropriate, and not only because Shido is an arrogant prick. In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis wrote that pride is the cause of all the other vices, which is appropriate because Shido is the cause of all the other mind dungeons you enter, either directly or indirectly. He's financed by Madarame and Kaneshiro, who make their money through nefarious means. He has a personal assassin to take out his
Catchy.
political opponents, including Futaba's mother, which caused her own neurosis. He's got the police and special investigations in his
dope.
pocket, which influences Sai's whole deal. And while Kamoshida isn't directly connected to Shido, the school principal is. And you can
Yeah.
argue that corruption affects the school's moral culture.
By the principal
and
covering
allows a
for
freak like
Kamoshida,
Kamoshida
bada
to
boom.
thrive there. At the beginning of the game, you catch Shido
yeah.
being very aggressive towards a woman, but reporting him for his crimes is hopeless. Shido
Yeah.
can just throw his influence around and gets you arrested instead.
Pretty
Shido's
much. We got the
eventual
assault
goal
charge.
is to run for Japanese prime minister, and even when it's obvious he's responsible for some petty skeevy stuff, his approval ratings continue to increase. A threat this complete can only be combated through existential means like the Phantom Thieves, but to make matters worse, Shido is equally aware of the metaverse and its ability to influence people's perception. That is terrifying. And after a few of his allies are
kidding.
taken down, he quickly adapts and is even able to manipulate the Phantom Thieves into targeting one of his political opponents. Oh god, he's genre savvy. But what's that
Yeah,
other
he pretty much
famous adage
screwed us
about
over with
pride?
Kumura.
It comes before the fall.
Yep.
Shido's actions towards the player bite him in the ass over and over. Not only did implicating you of a crime set you on the Phantom Thief path in the first place, it's a simple rudeness towards the squad that convinces them to keep up the Phantom Thief operation after their first successful heist.
Whoops.
And he repeatedly fails to recognize the player when running into him, even though he knows the thieves are high schoolers. So, yeah, his conspiracy is undone by a bunch of kids, but you'll find on this list that no criminal empire is too much for a player character. And for those of you who have played the game, you might argue that much of Shido's success is fabricated by an outside party anyway, but I think we'd be remiss not to
Yeah,
include
we're gonna
this
stop there.
unassailable scumbag.
Amen. I'm still waiting to get my hands on that bastard. Number 8 coming up.
The next few entries fall into a special category, crime lords in fantastical settings. I mean, we pretty much get
So-
how a mob boss works in the big city, right? But how does organized crime work in the Wild West? Turns out
Oh,
it's a
Arthur
lot less
Morgan?
organized. Less police round these parts, and the newly annexed
Or are we
states
going
of
for
the
the
1800s
ship?
represent boundless freedom for those willing to make the trip. At least that's how Dutch Vanderlyn
Oh,
sees it.
Vanderlyn.
Inspired by his father, who died in the Civil War opposing slavery, Dutch strives to live by nobody's rules but his own, forming one of the most feared bands of outlaws New Austin has ever seen. What
Damn.
makes Dutch so interesting to me is how we get to know him from multiple angles. In Red Dead Redemption, it's already established that our player character, John Marston, was raised by Dutch and ran with the Vanderlyn gang for some time. At some point they had a falling out, Dutch left John to die after a job had gone south, John miraculously survives and decides to end his days of crime, but the feds are trying to clean up the West, so they kidnap John's family and force John to hunt down Dutch and his former comrades if he ever wants to see them in one piece again. Dutch is
Damn.
still a dangerous outlaw with an impregnable fortress and an army of Native Americans he's managed to sweet-talk into an alliance, but it's clear that his best days are behind him. As players, we first meet Dutch as a sad shell of a man described to us, grasping at straws to save his hide. Then the sequel comes along, which is
number
actually a
2.
prequel, and we play as a member of Dutch's gang back when he's still a strong leader and on good terms with John. The dramatic irony is palpable. Dutch seems every bit like the fearless leader he intends to be. But if we've played the first game, we already know how the story ends. He sees himself as a Robin Hood, stealing for the sake of the downtrodden. But all of his altruism crumbles away as his enemies close in and his paranoia takes root. We watch allies drop out one by one. We see him doubt John's loyalty once John's son is born, and when Dutch comes back to the group saying he's tried his best to save John, well, we know he didn't try too hard. We see some triumphs here and there, and the man knows how to plan a heist, but by the end, his gang is a real catastrophe. So does someone who failed so hard deserve to be number 8 on this list? Well, despite his numerous bad calls, this wily devil is probably the most compelling antagonist Rockstar has ever written. And when he and John have that last stare down on the cliff, Dutch preferring to die on his own terms rather than be killed by another, well, it feels like the Wild West died with him. For better or for worse.
Our time has passed. Yeah.
Adios, Dutch. Well, he has a point. Time's gone past. And ironic considering what happened to John over there. You know, considering Vets turn on him, shoot him down. Cycle of revenge, my friends. The cycle of revenge. What are you gonna do? Anyway, number 7 is coming up.
Cowboys are cool, but let's
True.
think bigger.
Space Cowboys? There we
My
go.
research yielded 2 great candidates for sci-fi crime lords. On
There's
the
the
one
first
hand,
one,
we got
Handsome
Handsome
Jack.
from Borderlands 2, head of the Hyperion Company, and, with that power and influence, de facto ruler of the whole stinking planet. Like Dutch, you have a whole game where you learn to hate him, then a prequel where you kind of start to understand where he's coming from, even if you never really excuse his actions. But what is crime on Pandora anyway? I'm sorry, I love this character and I hate the fact that I do, but this topic just doesn't seem right for him. Handsome Jack is a warlord, an evil CEO, a huge dick face, but I just don't see him as a crime lord, at least not as much as other candidates. He's probably my number 11 if that counts for anything. So let's fall back on my
To be
other
fair,
choice.
considering how Pandora
Arya
is,
Cologne
not
from
surprised.
The Mass Effect series. Arya
Arya.
is known as the Pirate
Hey.
Queen of Omega. Omega being an enormous space station city in the Terminus system, far away from the Citadel or any other galactic governments. It's also essentially the capital of trade in this sector. Combine a high population and a remote location, and you've got yourself a wretched hive of scum and villainy, one that Arya sought to rule. She first came to Omega as an exotic dancer for the Afterlife Club, but quickly murdered the club's owner and took over as manager. Then she
Damn.
spent years making contacts with various gangs and businesses. On paper, Omega doesn't have a ruler, but everyone who lives there knows who's the head honcho, and Arya managed to overthrow that honcho, a Krogan that she kept alive merely as an example and mockingly renamed the Patriarch. Now that is a power play right there. So while Arya isn't necessarily in charge of all of the crime seeping out of this station, she sure as hell knows about it, and if she doesn't like it, she ends it. In Mass
Basically, the
Effect 2,
sheriff of
Shepard comes
Omega,
to her for
anyway.
information, which she'll give in exchange for a little job, protecting the Patriarch from a group of cutthroats that want him dead. She'd have her own men do it, but she's afraid that'd make her look soft. And upon a successful bodyguard mission, you have the option to suggest the Patriarch try and reclaim his kingdom. You do not, however, have the option for him to succeed. If he tries, he dies. Them's the breaks. But anyway, back to Arya. While continuing to be a badass in the comics, she gets forced out of Omega by a group called Cerberus in between games. Though, if you read those comics, she did a really good job defending herself, only fleeing
I mean, she
because
isn't
Cerberus
sorry.
threatened to just blow up the station if she didn't. So in Mass Effect 3, an entire DLC pack is available for you to help her take it back. Up until now, Arya was a very passive player. Her power expressed mainly through a compelling voice performance by Carrie Ann Moss.
It's always a pleasure, Shepard. Let me know if you want to talk later.
Now at last, we see the Pirate Queen in action. She masterfully commands hundreds of mercenaries at once. She demonstrates her knowledge of the inner workings of Omega, manages to recruit another local gang with sociopathic efficiency, makes a rousing speech to the masses that gets every civilian fighting for her return. Oh, and did I mention she's telekinetic? She's
Biotic.
also an expert at reading people, having nearly 1,000 years of experience thanks to her race's long lifespan. My favorite touch? Her base of operation in Omega is that same nightclub she started dancing in. And sure, she can only regain her turf with Shepard's help, but make no mistake, she's in charge 100% of the time. Don't fuck with Omega, and don't fuck with Arya.
Amen. Number 6.
Some games I can just talk about for hours. In fact,
What do you
I've
got?
probably amassed literal hours on this channel talking about BioShock. You already know where this is going.
Andrew Ryan?
Frank
Of
Fontaine.
Fontaine.
Like my other entries so far, a lot of Fontaine's intrigue comes from their rise to power which precedes even the first cutscene. But since so much of Bioshock is collecting diary logs and learning how things got so dank and dreary, Fontaine's story holds a lot more water. As promised by Andrew Ryan, Rapture would be an objectivist utopia, where great men could be great without unnecessary laws or ethics getting in the way. And Fontaine's criminal influence spread like algae over an ocean-soaked city. You can't walk 2 blocks in Rapture without finding a company owned by Fontaine that was a front for something else. The aforementioned Fontaine Fisheries was used to smuggle contraband to make millions. Fontaine Futuristics was developed with Tannenbaum to create plasmids and gene tonics. The Little Sisters Orphanage was a means of converting girls into Little Sisters necessary to create Adam. And Fontaine's Home for the Poor was a PR stunt that also provided test subjects for medical research. If you know anything about this game, you already know how Fontaine impersonates an Irish freedom fighter named Atlas and plays you like a fiddle. But today, I'm more interested in his rivalry with Ryan. Fontaine ran multiple criminal rings without ever getting caught. Ryan even knew what he was up to, but security could never catch Fontaine with any evidence. His tracks were too clean. Ryan tried to accept it at first, and praised Fontaine for the kind of success only Rapture could host. But in time, Ryan feared Fontaine's influence would eclipse his own. Ryan, Mr. Sweat of his brow, who believed anyone powerful enough had the right to that power, finally compromised his own beliefs and ordered his men to kill Fontaine. He was so scared, he betrayed the ideals Rapture was built upon. But of course, Fontaine isn't even dead, and he proceeds to use Ryan's long-lost brainwashed son to kill Ryan and take over the city. Look to the final boss fight. Yeah, I know it sucks, but look. Fontaine jacks up on Adam and turns into a giant golden man. If you didn't catch the allegory, he's Atlas, the Greek titan that holds up the earth, the central figure of Atlas Shrugged, the Ayn Rand book from which Ryan's philosophy derives. But as much as Ryan preaches, he's not the real Atlas. Fontaine is. He beat Ryan at his own game, only to get stabbed to death by a bunch of little girls. But hey, no one can play this game forever. He just played the game really, really well.
Yep, but unfortunately, it all backfired in his face.
I made a joke last time that every fighting game worth its salt has at least one cyborg.
Really?
That's even more true of crime syndicates. Maybe not as important in games like BlazBlue or Mortal Kombat that have a more supernatural setting,
LO,
but for
and
those
Bison.
grounded in at least some sense of reality, the crime lord that starts a fighting tournament to look for new recruits hits the perfect balance between ridiculous and plausible. Some of the best examples of this are M. Bison from Street Fighter, Heihachi Mishima from Tekken, and Geese Howard from Fatal Fury. Normally I'd want to rank each of these magnificent bastards individually, but since they're so similar in form and function, I'm gonna cram them all together in the middle here. Probably the most obscure of these three would be Geese,
Geese,
head of the Howard Connection and criminal kingpin of Southtown. He's pulling the strings behind all of the kidnappings in the Art of Fighting series, trying to keep other gang leaders like Mr. Big from encroaching on his turf while somehow also ordering them around. He supposedly died when Terry Bogard knocked him off a tall tower, but he survived thanks to the power of an ancient Chinese phoenix scroll. So Terry knocked him off a different tower. He keeps falling off the
Double.
But because of the loose continuity of the multiple franchises, and because SNK loves him so much, he keeps coming back. Then there's Heihachi, son of Jinpachi Mishima, who was the head of the Mishima family empire.
It was his own father to get its company.
Conglomerate could possibly be, but after a villainous turn and a very messy divorce, Heihachi had his father buried alive, took over the company himself, and transformed it into a weapons-focused Zaibatsu that acts as its own military. He has his own sordid past with high places, but more often than not, he's the one throwing others off. Everything in the series connects back to him. He either created, aligned with, or screwed over almost every character in the franchise, which leads to a lot of assassination attempts that he just shrugs off. My favorite being, well, just watch.
Pretty much!
Last but not least, the confusingly named M. Bison mixed the aesthetic of crime leader and dictator for Shadowloo, a paramilitary organization.
So originally,
the mission statement is unclear, but most of the time it's developing and smuggling biochemical weapons, or cloning hot lady soldiers to make up its ranks. Shadowloo probably has the most memorable roster of characters with its top 4, Bison, Sagat, Vega, Balrog, and sometimes Fong. Bison's responsible for the death of Chun-Li's father, the corruption of Violent Ken, and the death and reanimation of Charlie, and to us that may sound like a lot, but to him?
It was Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So how do we connect these three? Well, for one thing, they've all fought each other thanks to the ridiculousness of fighting game crossovers. They
True.
also all seek some form of immortality, either through scrolls, ogre, and devil genes, or transferring one's psychic essence into new bodies. I guess when you have all the money you could ever want, the next step on the ladder is to try and live forever.
Pretty
Finally,
much.
all three follow
But
a
didn't
golden
Heihachi
rule.
want to make sure,
Only
like,
the
you know,
strongest can lead.
devil?
It's great to have an army of psychophants to do your bidding, but when the going gets rough, you have to demonstrate your own power. Hold a martial arts tournament and beat up the biggest guy there. No one will ever question you again.
That pretty much describes it all. Predictable. Sorry, I had to say
Pokemon
it.
was always going to be a tough choice for this list.
Oh,
Every
yeah, there are a
generation
lot
has
of
a
crimes.
new evil team with a new
So,
evil leader. Even
Giovanni?
if the last two generations have subverted that a bit.
Hey,
But if we're
Guzmo.
going by how successful they were, frontrunners would be Getsis, who took over the Elite Four and nearly indoctrinated an entire country, and Cyrus, who got dangerously close to rewriting the universe itself. And while they have that supervillain vibe down, only one villain screams, Mob Boss. Team Rocket is the most
There you go.
iconic and omnipresent antagonist in the series, and Giovanni leads them with style and dignity. While later teams are more ambitious eco-terrorists, Giovanni's not here to change the world in a literal sense. He's gonna rule it through money and influence. Giovanni's character history is an interesting aggregate of criminal intrigue. By running the Celadon Game Corner as a front for their secret hideout, Team Rocket is highly reminiscent as the Bakuto, historical precursors to the Yakuza who made money by rigging games for feudal lords. With their hostile takeover of companies like Silphco, you get more of a modern Yakuza vibe. The lower grunts play more as cat burglars, stealing Pokemon and money in general to add to their boss's bankroll. When it
Pretty
came
much.
to Western audiences, Game Freak decided to localize Sakaki with an Italian name to utilize a mafia-inspired mythos more familiar to Western audiences. A touch I really like actually
Does
came
seem
from the
interesting
anime,
considering he's the
where
last gym
Giovanni
battle.
is often seen sitting in the dark with his pet Persian. Not only does this evoke a classic Bond villain archetype, it also quickly communicates a power differential between him and his famous cronies Jesse and James, who travel with an unevolved Meowth. This
Pretty
choice
much.
was so popular that Persian was added to Giovanni's team in later Kanto adventures. Now,
much.
maybe this is just a nostalgia talking, but Team Rocket seemed to really have its act together. They kidnapped a respected Poke expert, locked
Fuji.
down the biggest corporation in Kanto
Sophie.
and the city surrounding it, and through all of this, Giovanni's kept his record clean enough that they let him be a gym leader, specializing in the ground type because I guess he really wants to control the Earth? Outside of his gym, he's never too strict with his monotype team. He's also been seen using his monstrous Kangaskhan that matched well with the Nido family, the aforementioned Persian, a Honchkrow in Hard Gold and Soul Silver, which is the most Mafia Pokemon ever created, and Mewtwo? Yeah, let's talk about that for a second.
Oh, yeah,
Going
he
into theory
outcreated.
territory, I've always liked the speculation that Giovanni was plotting to catch and control Mewtwo. He's after the Sylph Scope and the Pokemon Tower so that he can catch some ghost types, and nearly snags a Master Ball, presumably for the most powerful Pokemon in the region. Sure, his
Mewtwo.
entire operation was destabilized by a 10-year-old, but again, player characters can just do that. Don't hold it against him. Now, my first big Pokemon experience was with Generation 2, so I first got to know Giovanni for the void his absence left in Team Rocket. He respectfully bowed out after his first defeat in Generation 1, which, depending on the interpretation, might mean that he respects the player's ambition and decides to reevaluate his life, and Team Rocket is so lost without him, they hijack a radio tower and broadcast a message begging him to come back. Sorry guys, not in this timeline, but
Oh.
there is another. In a turn of
Oh,
complete
yeah.
lunacy, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon
Rainbow
introduces
Rocket.
Team Rainbow Rocket, led by an alternate universe Giovanni who was successful in all of his endeavors, so much so that he utterly
Sheesh.
destroyed his home planet. He
Oops.
leads a who's who of series villains who've also destroyed their worlds, and not only does he have a Mewtwo, he has a Mega Mewtwo. Thank Arceus that you're the player character. But before
No
getting
kidding.
forced out of your reality, he remarks that he'll just find a new world to impress, which might tie into his appearance in Pokemon Go. Okay, you know what? Forget what I said about unambitious.
Not to mention Masters. He's still there. I think he's there too. Got a villain arc going on in that game. I haven't played Masters in a while, so I don't know how that story's going. So, if you guys know, just fill me in, alright? Time for the final 3. Let's see who rules their crime empire the best. Number 3.
I think I'm hitting a lot of the big players people expected, so this time I'm doing one for me. This is Hector Lamont from the cult classic Grim
Fandango.
Using crime to take over an underwater city? Impressive. A space station? Even better. But Hector has an iron grip on the afterlife. Like, all of it! As a quick refresher, Grim Fandango works on the ancient Aztec myth of Mictlan. When someone dies, they take a 4-year journey through this realm in order to pass on to the next stage of existence. Ideally, this means that it doesn't matter who you were in life. The trials of Mictlan give everyone a chance at redemption before determining what happens to their soul. But modern Mictlan has adopted a more Christian system of brownie points. The Reapers act as a travel agency, handing out tickets to the train at the end of Mictlan and offering express routes to those who are deemed virtuous by the system. The problem is, the system is total bunk run by Hector. It's unclear if Hector started the whole system in the first place or if he just rose up the ranks, but he certainly has a handle on it now. Hector is so sure that the train would drop him straight to hell if he ever tried to pass on, so rather than trying to better himself, he wants to cheat the door to eternity, and failing that, make Mictlan into his own personal paradise. He runs the city of El Marro through crooked officers and CEOs, giving out counterfeit train tickets and stockpiling the real ones for himself and his most loyal followers. Hector is maybe less immediately interesting than other crime lords, as he stays in the shadows for most of the game. In fact, you're working for him at the beginning of the game and don't even realize it. But once you meet him, he's got all the hallmarks. He's got his skeletal fingers in Mictlan's gambling rings. He's got a crazy girlfriend that would die for him and kill for him, and he's known to off his underlings when they disappoint him. Sure, everyone here is already dead, but he's still found a way to kill them. Specifically, he hired a florist named Bowsley who invented Sproutella bullets that could convert a skeleton into a morbid conversation piece. He's famous for making purgatory livable, but also, I guess, dieable, and he makes an excellent antagonist for Manny Calavera. One reaps, one sows.
Amen. And number 2?
Corrupt CEOs or dastardly outlaws alike, crime lords on this list are being taken down by the power of the player character. Or in Arya's case, reinstated by the player character. But what happens when the criminal is the player character? Well then, you get Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas, Liberty City, all pristine havens waiting to be devastated through your misdeeds. GTA's given us a pantheon of gangster kings, but no man's career matches the meteoric rise of Tommy Vercetti. Tommy starts his career working for the Forelli crime family, a powerful mafia in Liberty City. He's charismatic, hardworking, everybody loves him. Maybe a little too much, thinks the head honcho Sonny Forelli, who decides to cut Tommy short before he gets too influential. Sonny puts out a hit, and 11 men show up to bump off Tommy. And get this, Tommy goes to jail for murdering all 11 of them. Freaking how? At the time, Tommy doesn't know who called the hit, and he refuses to talk to the cops about the family. Snitches get stitches, after all. So after 15 years of incarceration, Sonny decides, yeah, this guy's a legend. I'm gonna pull some strings and get him out. He's so charismatic, the guy who tried to have him murdered decided to spring him from jail. Then Sonny sends him out of town to expand the drug trade in Vice City, and the game starts. While not my favorite protagonist in the series, Tommy epitomizes a certain GTA mindset. Mainly, you can cause as much havoc as you want, set the world on fire, and eventually the cops will calm down and you can live easy again. The rules do not apply to you, you're the good guy. And what a good guy you are. By the end of the game, he's guilty of drug trafficking, gun running, starting riots, intimidating jurors, playing both sides of a gang war, hijacking a boat, stealing missile technology, running multiple money launderer businesses, murder, and murder.
Yeah,
in due time, he murders Sonny Forelli, only when he finds out about the hit, mind you, and takes over the criminal underworld of Vice City. And if Ken Paul's website is to be believed, he's still running the joint 20 years later. Tommy's the type to rise to the top of any environment you put him in. He knows when to make friends, when to play nice, and when to cut ties with liabilities, such as his dismissal of Ken Rosenberg in San Andreas. We already knew we were in charge here, but now, all of Vice City knows it too.
Amen. It makes it work. And the #1 crime lord?
I know my gaming knowledge isn't complete. There's always plenty of relevant games I haven't played yet that could easily be factored into a countdown. In this case, games like the Mafia series and Saints Row are all about mobs.
True.
But I doubt either of those would stand up to my favorite series about organized crime, the Yakuza franchise. And a character I've ignored for far too long.
Kiryu? Moshi Moshi?
Hey! What just happened?
Then
Hi,
again,
Demo.
calling Kiryu a crime lord might be stretching it. He's often more of a
He
henchman
does take over the
rogue,
family.
but he's also a total boss. And everything about his character cuts to the core of what it means to be a Yakuza. Orphaned at a young age, Kiryu was adopted by Shintaro Kazuma, captain of the influential Dojima family, and fell in love with the ideals of the Yakuza. As soon as he came of age, he begged his adoptive father to let him join the ranks, and dedicated his life to both the clan and the people of Tokyo. You see, there's a
much
bit
put
of
his
an
all into
idealization
everything.
to the Yakuza, which has always worked really hard to portray a certain image, as champions of the common man. Sure, they do crime, but it's their existence that keeps other criminals in check and businesses afloat. Not to mention, historically, the Yakuza have donated to disaster relief efforts on many occasions. It's not just a necessary evil, it's an absolute good. Granted, a normal poll would show that not many Japanese citizens actually believe this shtick. But there's also a strong Yakuza fan club, and this is the way Kiryu sees it for most of his life. High-ranking members show their devotion through elaborate tattoos and strict traditionalism. Kiryu's discipline, power, and tenacity lead him quickly through the ranks, earning him the nickname the Dragon of Dojima. He's not to be trifled with. But when left to his own devices, he's an instrument of good. Yakuza isn't like Grand Theft Auto. You can walk around the overworld, but you can't just attack civilians or blow stuff up. The game insists that Kiryu wouldn't do that. What he would do, however, is
Save a
help
puppy.
anyone in need. Beat up a gang of thugs for throwing rocks at a dog, help out a girl at the docks by diving for treasure, fighting sharks with a harpoon.
Damn.
Yeah, this game is actually pretty
Kiryu.
weird and filled with side quests and minigames. Karaoke, bowling, restaurant management, even just waiting for the phone to ring is a minigame, and Kiryu's as extra about it as he is with everything else. What a freaking nerd. But it's that devotion to whatever he's doing that makes him so compelling. As a Yakuza, he sees himself as a samurai sworn to protect the weak and the downtrodden, down to every last orphan and puppy on the streets. But the real Yakuza aren't always so wistful and starry-eyed, are they? These games aren't stupid. They know the Yakuza don't conform to Kiryu's romanticized vision. Drugs, gang wars, public destruction. Organized crime does more harm than good, to say the least. And through his efforts to see them as a chivalrous league, Kiryu suffers as much as anyone at the hands of these people. This is why, after being appointed the 4th chairman of the Tojo clan, which is a really big deal, mind you, Kiryu immediately abdicates this position and leaves to run the Morning Glory orphanage, which is actually a front for...
The Yakuza.
No, it just takes care of orphans. So yeah, Kiryu spends a relatively small percentage of these games as an actual crime lord. He's been retired for the last 4 games. But as the saying goes, you try to get out, and they just keep pulling you back in. Kiryu is a heroic figure and a total goofball, but he's also a tragic soul. He can't outrun his past, and a large part of him doesn't
come
want
running
to.
back.
5 years out of the mob, and if you asked him who he is, he would tell you, deep down, he is always a Yakuza. I think more so than any other example on this list, these games examine the true underbelly of the criminal life. The power, the allure, the dream, and the nightmare. Which is why, against all common sense, I named the Dragon of Dojima as the #1 crime lord in video games. I'm the Green Scorpion, and thank you for keeping your oath to this internet family. If you're new here, consider yourself made. I promise not to leave a horse in your bed. As for next time,
Ruin has come to our family.
Well, that was fast. Ah, shit.
Do I want to know? Oh, there you go. The top 10 crime bosses. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know. Till next time, like, subscribe for more. See ya.